Hello and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSP. This is the Ukraine war news update for the 15th of April 2023. I am up at the crack of dawn because I'm off out today and I thought I'd better do the news video before I go because it's all loaded and ready. I will be rushing through this. However, Ukrainian losses for the Russians for the day before, all the usual caveats apply. If you don't know those caveats, look at all of my other videos. Low numbers really across the board: 460 liquidated personnel, 3 tanks, 4 armored personnel carriers, 1 artillery system, 6 fuel tanks and vehicles, 3 pieces of special equipment. I mean, that's very low numbers comparatively speaking, particularly artillery systems. APCs and tanks, low too, but 3 pieces of special equipment. So that is a fairly decent number because they are going to be things like radar installations or electronic warfare pieces of equipment, but still a quiet day on the front in that regard. Now, there's been some facts and figures or claims and figures thrown out concerning losses. The BBC, I've talked about the BBC Russia with Mediazona doing some research that's rather similar to Oryx, what they do with equipment, they've done with people, looking across social media, newspapers, for confirmed Russian deaths that are 100% connected to the war. And so therefore it's a super conservative minimum. In fact, they suggest it is only 50% of the reality. And a group of volunteers have confirmed names of 20,451 Russian combatants killed in action. So these are definitely killed in action in Ukraine. 33% of these were civilians before the invasion. Volunteers, mobilized prisoners, newly recruited members of Wagner. We include only cases that we've been able to verify. So collected data does not reflect the full extent of the KIA. We think that our list contains 50% fewer names than the actual number of soldiers that have been buried in Russia. We studied cemeteries in over 60 Russian settlements. According to our data, Russia has lost more than 3,230 elite specialists, special operations forces, soldiers, paratroopers, marines, etc. Since the beginning of the war, there are 134 military pilots among the KIA. So that's a huge loss. So that would suggest 268 pilots in total. If you look at some of the aircraft loss, that is, it's interesting. Some analysts say that the aircraft numbers on these official figures are the most inflated of all the figures. At the beginning of the war, they were pumping up the numbers. It is thoughts, but to suggest that around 260 pilots are dead KIA, that's not including the ones that parachuted out and survived, that have been caught, that have been brought back. That is a huge number. These specialists took years to prepare and millions of dollars to train. Now mobilized civilians, volunteers and prisoners are the backbone of the Russian troops fighting in Ukraine. We confirmed names of 3,080 prisoners, KIA, those are convicts. Wagner PMC even has to organize new cemeteries for them. In the first 6 months of the invasion, majority of the losses were reported by Dagestan and Buryatia, Russian regions with low average income where many young people choose to serve because it was almost the only social lift available. Now the picture has changed. Now large industrial regions in the Urals report most of the Russian losses. There, thousands of people were mobilized and sent to battle after very little training. We confirmed the deaths of 1,900 Russian mobilized soldiers. Some say their comrades were killed because of poor leadership. So on and so forth. Let's continue. And it's logical that BBC confirmed names of 1,947 officers, including 525 with rank senior and major. With many officers killed, it's hard to train newbies and organize your units effectively. So during the 14 months of the invasion, the face of the Russian forces has changed. At first, Moscow relied on its best officers and elite troops. Now its main force are mobilized civilians and Wagner PMC. Really interesting stuff. That then leaked info's come out. Russia's prize Spetsnaz commando units have suffered 90 to 95% casualty rate in Ukraine. Just insane. When you're starting to use these special operations forces as your frontline general soldiers, then that's reflective of something going wrong. You don't have the soldiers to do that, so you're bringing in anyone you can, and this means that you are treating your best soldiers to take years to train. These guys are usually older because they are you don't go straight into special operations forces. You become a soldier first, and then you pick the best soldiers, you train them, so on and so forth. This is years of expertise lost for the Russians. Wagner Group founder, as kind of maybe a reflection of this, Prigozhin has said now's the ideal option for Russia to cease active phase of the war and go on the defensive. So he's recommending in a press release that Russia ceases the active phase of the war and firmly entrenches itself in the occupied territories. Wow. So, what does that tell you? Quite a bit. Russia were quite active in hitting cities and towns yesterday. There was a really terrible attack on Sloviansk. School was damaged, several apartments and garages were destroyed. There's quite a lot of footage out about this. Consequences of the Russian attack on Sloviansk. There was a 2-year-old being rushed to hospital. It was all pretty horrific. Again, it seems like sort of S-300s inaccurately hitting residential buildings, or accurately hitting residential buildings, inaccurately being fired against military targets, if indeed that was the objective. The Russian aircraft hit an enterprise in the Semenivsky district of the Chernihiv region. So this will be up north, using these aerial, probably JDAM equivalents, pretty sizable bombs and whatnot. Again, appearing to hit residential areas. Of course, the Ukrainians won't tell you when they do hit military targets, generally speaking. And a video of a rarely seen Ukrainian 79K6 Pelican radar being hit by Russian Zala Lancet loitering munition. This is a surveillance radar, 3D surveillance radar designed for target acquisition and air traffic control. It was developed by the Ukrainian scientific and production complex Iskra. So these would be pieces of kit that have been co-opted to military use, I would imagine. But that's a bad loss. Talked about sort of these kind of targets at the end of the daily loss list. Special equipment, that's what that would come under. That's a Russian hitting the Ukrainians with their Lancet drones that are a real thorn in the side for the Ukrainians. And another Russian hit here. Russia says it inflicted this blow on Ukraine's forces today in Bakhmut. It's a huge explosion and could have been an artillery strike on an ammo dump, unverified, but looks genuine. I haven't seen anything else about this, so I know nothing about this, only what Tim White has put, and it is a huge explosion, that. So, yeah, that'll be a big loss for the Ukrainians if it is indeed a major cache of weaponry, munitions. Right, moving on to military aid, humanitarian aid, etc., etc. This is super important if the Chinese government sticks to this position. So China has pledged not to sell arms to any part of Russia's war, to any party of Russia's war in Ukraine. Chinese Foreign Minister Qin Gang said on April the 14th that his country wouldn't sell weaponry to either side of the Russia-Ukraine war, reports CAP. However, on the other side of the coin, Reuters has reported that Ukraine allegedly is finding more Chinese components in Russian weapons. They might not be selling weapons, but they're selling dual-purpose components that can be utilized in weapons. Ukraine has allegedly been finding an increasing number of components originating from Russia in China. From China in Russian weapons recovered on the battlefield. So there is that. Poland to gradually supply MiG-29 fighter jets to Ukraine. The Polish president said that Poland will transfer these MiG-29 jets to Ukraine gradually while Poland waits for their own air fleet to be replenished by NATO aircraft. The Canadians have supplied all 8 Leopard 2 tanks. They are now in Poland. We'll continue to stand with Ukraine and to provide Ukrainians with the tools that they need to fight and win this war, says Canadian Defense Minister Anita Anand. In Denmark, the Ukrainian military has completed artillery training on French-made Caesar self-propelled howitzers. These are really decent bits of kit. Additionally, until now, Denmark has provided Ukraine with military aid totaling approximately $915 million. Denmark will deliver these to Ukraine within the next couple of weeks as the Ukrainian soldiers have finalized their training. So that's good news. Hungary. This is coming out of the leaks. Hungary may secretly allow the transit of weapons to Ukraine through its skies, despite official statements that there will be no transit. So again, it's rather similar to things like Serbia. Some of these countries being put under immense pressure to help Ukraine, but their official line to appease Russia is that they are not helping. So some interesting stats. Latvia has transferred about half of its entire defense budget to Ukraine. Estonia 43%, and Lithuania 35.3%. These are the leaders in the field of military aid in terms of percentage of their own budgets. So the Baltic nations really are stepping up. Huge help in terms of uh, their their military budgets. In terms of like real term figures, obviously US, EU institutions, UK, Germany, Japan, Netherlands. Of course, you've got to understand that Germany might be ahead of the UK there because they also have a large proportion of the EU institutions aid given as well. So if you add their proportion of the EU institutions to Germany's total, Germany will almost certainly be ahead of the UK. But interestingly, Japan there, a lot of financial aid being given from Japan, not so much military, but financial. The US and ATACM's situation with Morocco, yes, they are selling ATACMs to Morocco, but Thomas Tyner says there's so many people jumping on this. Ukraine could order ATACMs too, but doesn't want to because it would take a year plus for them to arrive. So yeah, it's one thing selling arms to Morocco, but if actually it's not going to be made and delivered for over a year, then it's a bit harsh to say the US aren't going to give Ukraine ATACMs. They could order them, but they'd just get them a year down the line. There are arguments either way on this, and I want to look at that further in an extra video. These are Gepards, probably in Germany, but yeah, it appears that Ukrainians have received training on these. A bunch of these just driving down the road. I mean, that's good. That's a good look for anyone interested in Ukraine getting the required kit. Netherlands, Switzerland pledged funds to IFC program for Ukraine's economy. The Netherlands and Switzerland committed additional funds to a $2 billion international finance corporation's program that is aimed at bolstering Ukraine's economy. And on the same note, Prime Minister Shmyhal was assured of additional support for Ukraine in the amount of more than $5 billion from Britain, Germany, and France. Denmark is creating a special fund and plans to fill it with €1 billion. Spain, Ireland, Japan, Lithuania, Latvia, Iceland, and the Netherlands will also provide additional support. Lots of support coming in. And talk about military aid for Russia. Here we've seen these naval turrets that we've seen on the back of sort of APCs. Now we've seen one loaded on the back of an artillery tractor. You may laugh at these things, but if they do a job, then actually there's if you're a drone that's taken out the sky by one of these things, there's no difference between being taken out by one of these things and one of those and a purpose made autocannon for the job. So yes, what this does do is it reflects the desperation that Russia are in. So it's not so much about laughing about this bit of kit. It's about laughing at. I don't mean laughing at. Do you know what I mean? It's about showing the desperation, desperate straits that Russia are in terms of military equipment. Right, geopolitical stuff. I haven't amassed really much at all. I don't want to belabor this point, and I'll say it really quickly. But Julia Davis, who does all the translation of the propagandists, is saying that basically Tucker Carlson is all over Russian state TV. Literally said, meanwhile, all over Russian state TV, Tucker Carlson, and more Tucker Carlson. Just to the point where the Russian propagandists are now calling him a colleague. So their quote colleague Tucker Carlson and start portraying Jack Teixeira, who's a leaker, as a mini Trump and a heroic leaker. So having previously described him as a total nobody. So it's really interesting to see a shift there of the propagandists. It's always interesting to keep an eye on what the propagandists are saying, who they are shouting about, who they think are on their side in the information space. Former Russian president and deputy head of the Security Council, Dmitry Medvedev, said that in the event of a NATO war against Russia, quote, it is not known who will win, but Poland, as a NATO outpost, will definitely disappear along with its stupid prime minister. But God, Medvedev is saying some pretty horrible things these days. But it's pretty harsh. Poland have really been singled out here. Don't know what's going. Look, do you know what? If we have a massive nuclear war, who knows what happened? It'd be pretty terrible. But I can assure you that Poland will get it. Oh yeah, Poland will get it. So that's basically where Russia are at. Poland are enemy number one, which is nice because it was the UK a couple of weeks ago. So hey, good luck, Poland. Anyway, thanks for watching that. Just a really quick one today. Please like, subscribe, and share. Really appreciate all the support. I'm off for the day, toodle pips, and I may get a chance to record a video later. Ta-ra.